So this is the example of the craps game simulator. And this is almost the exact same code that we saw in the slides. I only added a return zero statement and at the end of the main method. And I did not add all of the comments, but as for the rest, this is the exact same code. So let me point out the new things. So one of the new things is this enumeration of status. And I'll show you what that looks like and what the difference is when we step through this program. And I'll run this a couple of times for you to show you uh, how we get different types of games, different types of output. So for example, winning on the first roll of the die, losing on the first roll of the die, uh, not getting either a 7, a winning 7 or 11, or not getting a losing 2, 3, or 12 on the first roll, but instead playing the game where we try to hit or get the same number of points that we got on the first roll. And then ultimately winning by getting that number of points or losing by getting a 7. Uh, so Let me first run this a couple of times to show you that. One thing I want to note, you can see there's a green squiggly line over here under game status. If you look at the warning, it says the enum type status is unscoped, prefer enum class over enum. Now, we are coding in C, not in C++, so there are no classes in C. So you can conveniently ignore this warning. Okay, so let me run this with F5, and here's the output on the first run. So what happened here? So on the first run, the player rolled 4 plus 1, which is 5. So you neither lose, neither win on the first roll, so you get 5 points. And now we have to try to get 5 points again by continuously rolling after that. And on the first attempt after that, we get 1 plus 1, which is equal to 2, which means we continue to play. So right now, after this stage, if we get 7, we lose. If we get 5, we win. So on the second roll after that, 6 plus 5 is 11. It's not 5, but it's not 7 either. So we play again. Player rolls 1 plus 4 equal to 5, which is what we needed. So the player wins. So this is one outcome. Try it again. And this one over here, kind of similar thing. Player does not win on the first roll, but ultimately wins after 3 more rolls after that. And you can see that the outcome second time was different from the first time, and that is because we are seeding the rand function, the pseudo random number generation function, with different times, the system time. So let me try that again, a third time, and you can see this time again the rolls are different again. Okay, let me try that a couple more times. Okay, this one's clearly different. We do not win or lose on the first roll. We have 6 points instead, and after that we roll for a 6, still don't get a 6, and we hit a 7, and the player ultimately loses. Let's see if we can win or lose on the first roll. If that happens, no. There you go. Player rolled 2 plus 5 equals 7, player wins. And that's it. That's the end of the game. We never entered the while loop in this time. And you can see since we're using the rand function, we have a much more interesting program. It doesn't always do the exact same thing. And it doesn't even it doesn't even need user input for that. Okay. Say player loses. Let me try that again. Player loses. Let's see if we can lose on the first roll. There you go. 2 plus 1 equal to 3. And remember, that was one of the outcomes over here in the case statements. If you get a 2, 3, or 12 on the first roll, you lose immediately. So you can see all four possible outcomes do happen. Now run this one more time, and let me step through it. Let me step through the program this time. Uh, Another thing, this enum thing, this enumeration, this enum status, is happening outside the main function, outside any function, as you can see. Now, whenever you put anything, any code, any statement, and remember this is a statement, right? It has a semicolon at the end. Whenever you put any statement outside of all functions, like this enum status statement, whenever you do that, whatever you declare or define over there is, we call that a global definition or declaration. Global, because whatever you do outside of any function is visible to all functions. Before that, you've seen that when we defined variable like my point inside the main function, this variable my point will only be accessible inside the main function. Outside the main function, this will not be accessible, will not be visible. This will be the topic of our next lecture, so we'll get to that right after this one. But anything that you put on the outside, and we haven't done that yet, but anything you put outside here is visible, usable everywhere. And in this case, that is this mapping, this enumeration of enum status and its possible values, continue, won, and lost, mapped to, as you can see right now, continue mapped to 0, won mapped to the number 1, and lost mapped to the number 2. Okay, so let me put a breakpoint over here and run this. Okay, so we're at the switch statement now. I skipped through a couple of steps, and what I want to show you over here in the watch window is how the assignment of one of these enumerated status values, how those show up, how those show when we assign those to game status. Game status is a variable of this type status whose values we have defined up here globally. Okay, so let me continue. F10. Okay, so that takes me to the default case. And what will happen now is game status will be assigned the value, the enum value, continue. And take a look over here. I'll step and look at this. Game status, the value of game status is continue. And in the parenthesis it says 0, that's the integer value. But continue, this continue label is being recognized by the compiler as an enum and as an enumerated value. Continue this. So since the game status is set to continue, at some point later on the game status has to change to either won or lost. So let's continue running. So we're in the while loop now. Okay, scroll down. Okay, so we roll the dice, and the sum is 3, which means, and we have to hit 6. I can see all of that from down here from the watch window for variables. Okay, so sum is not equal to point, so we'll skip over the if condition. We go into the else block. Sum is not equal to 7, so we do not go into this if block either, and we are at the end of the while loop. We go back up. The continuation condition is false, of course, and we roll the dice again, and this time we rolled an 11. Still not what we need to win, but it's also not what will make us lose. So we don't go into the if condition, we don't go into the if condition inside the else condition, and we go back up to the continuation condition of the while loop. Still true, roll the dice again, and we get a 4. Still not what we need, so we skip over those if conditions, back up to the while loop. Game status is still equal to continue. We roll the dice, we get a 5. You can follow along in the output window over here. So all of the statements that are supposed to print out are printing out. Okay. False, false, back up to the while loop. Roll the dice again. We got 7, which means we lose. Okay. But so we don't go into the first if condition. We go into the else block. The if condition in there is true. See what happens now. Game status is will be set to lost. So right now, game status is still continue. I execute this line and see the value of game status change to lost. And next to it, of course, its integer value 2 that it is mapped to. And that's pretty much the end of the game. We go into the while loop to the continuation condition. This is now false. We exit the while loop. Check the first if condition. No, game status is not 1, so we don't print that message. Instead, we print the other message, player loses. And you can see here in the output window, that's exactly what happened. We essentially lose the game at the end. And that's it. That's all that's happening over here. The roll dice function, of course, is as straightforward as explained in the theoretical part. Not much to it, right? So that's all I have to. I think that's all about the example, about the craps example, and we'll move on now to the next section.